That's how we own it! Welcome back to Street Politicians. This is part 2 of our series on Breonna Taylor.
So we've been joined today by 2 people who I just love to talk to and hear from until freedom has been guided in how we operate around the true details of the Breonna Taylor matter, because Breonna Taylor doesn't have a case. To be clear, she never had a case in her life, so she does not have a case. She is not on trial. But in the Breonna Taylor matter, the matter of her being killed, we've had to turn to these incredible attorneys, and there's one missing, which is Attorney Benjamin Crump, to get real true facts, because this Kentucky, first of all, Lonita, your hometown, and Louisville specifically, things travel fast around here. People get messaging and things and whatever mixed up. The telephone game goes down here. Yeah. And so there's all kinds of information that's out there that is not accurate. So we've been guided by truth and facts by turning to Attorney Sam Aguiar and Attorney Lonita Baker, and of course our brother who is not with us, Attorney Benjamin Crump, so that when we're out here speaking, that we're telling the truth. And even in instances where people want to be, sometimes folks want pity, so they say, oh, she was sleeping in her bed when she was shot, and y'all have said no. That is not true. She wasn't sleeping. She was sleeping before the police knocked, and she heard a knock, and she got up. So you guys have not tried to put out details that would just lend itself to your position, but just the facts.
Just the facts.
So
no need to embellish a story that's already so tragic. Like, we didn't need to embellish it.
Right. Right. So first of all, how are you guys doing? Post Daniel Cameron coming back, which we talked a lot in our segment with Janiyah and Tamika Palmer about that phone call that you made, Sam, to the Attorney General's office to say, do not make this lady drive, this mother drive a distance to hear something that we know is not justice, true justice for Breonna Taylor. And it happened anyway. Daniel Cameron's office allowed you all to be there in Frankfurt, 40 minutes to an hour away from where you all live in Louisville. And I just want to know, how do you feel? What's the human side of hearing that there was not only no charges related to Breonna Taylor, but that the only charges that there was an indictment for was bullets that went into a wall? No, we should hear from you first, Sam, because you always want to tell Lonita. You always pushing a black woman forward. We appreciate it, but we want to hear from you, Sam.
So Lonita's got a great voice, and unfortunately, I've been through this before. So, last police shooting case that I had, I vowed never to have to see a family go through that again, to have to go all the way down to meet with a district attorney, what you call down here. I think you mentioned before, we got weird names down here, but to go meet with the DA and just have them, look you in the eye and say, there's no justice coming here, and do it nonchalantly. So we didn't want that to happen for Tamika Palmer. I mean, God bless that family. They're incredible. And to go all the way down to Frankfurt to get that news, to find out that we actually got the news after the rest of the country got the news, because by the time that we were actually in that conference room and, they were putting on their little show to try to show this faux sympathy for and everything, it was after the rest of the country had already heard everything. And since then, it's gotten so much worse, because now you start to learn what was going on in that grand jury room. I mean, just imagine 12 people today. The mayor says, hey, I'm going to put you in a room. We got James over here. We got Jessica over here, and we're going to spend 3 days going with you. And then at the end, you got to tell us which one needs to be our next police chief. And you go through and you learn all about James. You learn all about Jessica, and you're already starting to feel like the mayor's office really wants you to pick James. But you keep asking all these questions, and you keep learning things. And then on the last day, just imagine, 10 out of 12 of you are ready to make Jessica your next police chief, and the mayor walks in and says, hey, time to vote, but you can only pick James. And if you don't want James, then you can just leave here right now, but you can't pick Jessica. So 10 of you want to pick Jessica, but you can't. And then you watch the mayor get on TV later and say, you know, the grand jury decided and we agree that James should be our next police chief. And just imagine if you're that grand juror sitting at home, and then imagine if all of a sudden you see that that mayor had actually endorsed James previously and that James had contributed to his campaign. That's what we're dealing with right now, is a grand jury that just feels like they have been betrayed, and a country that feels like they've been betrayed, and a family that feels like they've been betrayed, and it's been awful.
I think for me, just listening to that, the whole grand jury process in itself is dangerous. You know, when they make this statement about you can indict a ham sandwich, it's based on that reality. You know, it's based on the reality that if you show them something to say this is the only thing you can do, then what else do you have?
The thing that I do want to point out here, though, is in listening to those grand jury tapes, this was a damn good grand jury. They were asking the right questions. They were involved, engaged, but it's the prosecutors that were involved that tarnished the whole process.
Explain that to us.
Yeah.
What does that sound like?
Yeah, that sounds like the prosecutors involved in presenting the case to the grand jury. They knew going in on Monday morning when they started presenting evidence that at the end of the day, the only charges that they were gonna present were the wanton endangerment charges against Brett Hankinson. So they put on this show of, it's going to take us 3 days of presenting evidence, grand jurors asking questions only for not the witnesses to answer the questions, but for those prosecutors to answer questions, for the grand jurors to say, hey, we want to see all the body camera footage, but for the prosecutor to say, oh, we don't have time for that. And in most states, and in Kentucky, the case is that the prosecutors are supposed to be advisors to the grand jury. So if the grand jury wanted to see all of the video, prosecutors were supposed to even if it took the whole week, they're supposed to make time and let that grand jury see all of the video. I have no doubt in my mind that if the grand jury had been presented with charges against all of the officers and homicide charges, on behalf of Breonna, that there would have been an indictment for all of them.
You think so?
I think so. But not only that, I think that these grand jurors were deprived of, we hear for months, Daniel Cameron, I want to turn over every rock and get to the truth. I think they were deprived of truth. We've got good evidence capabilities these days. Unfortunately, for people, if they don't realize it, everything that you put on your cell phone, it's there. This grand jury got no cell phone forensics. Brett Hankinson had 120 phone calls and text messages within the 6 hours after this shooting, and this grand jury never even heard that.
Wow.
This crime scene was tampered with so badly, and I think this grand jury picked up on that. And
Because?
You had evidence.
No, I mean, what makes you think the grand jury picked up on it? It was what you heard in the
They were
question.
asking questions. At one point you have a grand juror ask, hey, that bullet that was in there, I didn't see that earlier. Where did that come from? And
Asking where's the blood at? This was a femoral artery shot in the house. Where's the blood at?
So tell it, this is street politics.
Yeah, we got to hear
You
about
got to
that.
break it street level.
So if you shot in your artery, your femoral artery, which is in your thigh area, there's going to be a lot of blood. Almost like when you watch scary movies and the blood's just squirting out. There's going to be a lot of blood from one of those. There's no blood on the inside. The only blood inside of Breonna's apartment is from Breonna. There's none on the outside of the immediate outside of the door. You don't get blood until you get to the parking lot.
oh, you want to go street politics? Let's put it this way: if Kenny Walker just without a doubt shot John Mattingly, where the hell's the blood? Why does that bullet enter in the middle of his thigh and enter up much higher? And how come it's a full of metal jacket bullet that they're saying that shot John Mattingly when Kenny Walker's gun, clear as day, is shooting hollow points?
And who puts what band puts a wallet in their front pocket?
So You know, there's so many things that this grand jury did not hear, yet they were still ready to indict. And when you're Daniel Cameron and you're a prosecutor, just like Lonita said, you were there to assist them. But if this grand jury at the end of the day says, we want you to draft indictments, we want you to, you know, educate us on what charges we can pursue, a prosecutor can't just sit there and dodge it and say, well, you know, all you got is 3 counts of wanton endangerment when you've got a body of 12 people, 10 of whom I believe wanted to indict every single one of these officers for felonies and for more than just that. So there's a lot of explaining to do right now. But, you know, Mysonne and Tamika, the biggest problem we have right now is that because Daniel Cameron decided to step in as the top prosecutor in the state, to get recourse here is difficult. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
We don't have double jeopardy. So again, talking to everybody, you always hear about double jeopardy. That doesn't apply here. There were no indictment. You know, there was not a no true bill.
Yeah, there was
it
no.
never went to a jury.
So for me, so basically, he just circumvented the whole process. He made
an
a decision
arbitrary decision.
that the jury that they didn't even deserve their their day in court. The jury didn't even need to hear anything because in his mind they weren't guilty of anything.
Right.
And the disappointing thing is that he put on this show as if he did, as if the grand jury made these decisions along with his office, as if they were on board. From May until September, he made this whole show about, I'm doing my independent investigation. Well, when you listen to the grand jury recordings, a large percentage of it are the same interviews that the Louisville Metro Police Department's Public Integrity Unit conducted.
So it wasn't much.
So you didn't do
more.
anything.
Oh, it was worse than that. I mean, you know, you got one officer interviewed that he gave the morning of the shooting. And he's talking about how Kenny Walker shot 15 times. There was bullets going out everywhere, and how he saw Brett Hankison walk up to the front door and shoot in there, and he says it 3 different times. Well, the Attorney General's office doesn't want the grand jury to hear all that because it doesn't fit their narrative. So they re-interviewed this guy 6 months later, and they only play that interview for the grand jury. They do not play the interview, from right after the fact. And it's just, none of these officers turn in a full loadout. So when they're counting their rounds, none of these officers on scene have the amount of bullets they're supposed to have. All these bullets that are in this place, they only recovered half of them, LMPD did. And they couldn't match some of them to any of these guns. And you've got so many other things going on, but it seems pretty damn obvious that Daniel Cameron made a political decision very early on that my allegiance and loyalty to this FOP, Tamika, just like you're talking about, trumps, pun intended,
Yes, right.
any justice that this woman and this family deserves. And all that grand jury got to hear was 20 hours worth of whatever they knew would be enough to basically tell all of us, hey, they heard a full case. And he just thought because of the grand jury secrecy that he'd be able to get out of there and say, listen, we put on 20 hours worth of testimony and evidence and witnesses. And sorry, but this grand jury decided not to indict. Thank
Decided
God.
not to indict, to me, is a lie.
It is
right?
a lie.
Right,
It
it's
is
a
a lie.
lie, a bold lie.
It's a bold
because they
lie.
you can't say someone decided not to do something that they would never. It was never an option for them to do in the first place. And but I want to ask you, so is there, because everybody's like, what can we do, right? So we want to talk about that. But before, there is the issue of the one person who is the witness that said he did hear an announcement of police being on the other side of the door. And this is important because what we're talking about, folks have this idea that no knock warrants means there's no knock. That's not what a no knock warrant is.
That's right.
It can be. It could mean that they just show up, they don't knock, and they just break the door down and do what they have to do. But no knock has other elements, meaning that they don't have to announce who's on the other side of the door. Right? They have the right to enter without you understanding who's actually at your door. Right? Right? Okay. Yep. So when we say that they did not, that they used a no-knock warrant, what we're saying, or what I understand to be clear, is that they did knock, which is what woke Kenny and Breonna up out of their sleep, and other people, because other people are saying they heard some banging.
Yeah.
But when Kenny and Breonna approached, I think I heard him say, kept saying, who is it? Because to be clear, this is Breonna's apartment, right? So Kenny is there with her as her boyfriend. He's there with her. But she's basically, hello, at my house. Who the heck is at the door? Right. And there's no response from the other side based upon what Kenny said and how many other
23.
witnesses? 23 witnesses. So I said 12 somewhere the other day. I got to get my stuff together.
Oh, I've been saying 15. I had to double count. It was 23.
Okay, so 23 other people. So they didn't hear anything. But they have produced for the grand jury one person who, y'all tell us about this person, but one person whose story is different. His story is different. And that was the only witness, I'm just making sure, that was presented to the grand jury as to whether or not the police announced themselves.
Kind of.
Okay.
So what was bad about this is when Daniel Cameron got up and grandstanded and said these officers knocked and announced. You made a very good point. Under the law, United States Supreme Court law, a no-knock warrant means that you can just beat the door down and go right in. A knock and announce situation means you have to knock and announce. You can't just knock and beat down the damn door. You have to announce. This warrant had been converted to a knock and announce warrant, so they were required by law.
When was that?
It was done that day, and it was done that day because had it been a no-knock, they would have had to score it differently, and the SWAT team would have had to have been present. They wanted to hit that house for who knows what reason, but they converted it to a knock and announce. So where it's really important, Tamika, is if they did not announce, they did not comply with the warrant as it had been converted.
Okay, we gotta slow it all the way down because I'm
So
challenged with some things. I need to understand.
So basically what you're saying is the no-knock warrant has a different criteria. The no-knock warrant means that you could just knock, you don't have to say anything, you just bust the door down and run in.
And it's more dangerous.
It's
you
more
have to have
dangerous.
a SWAT team.
It's definitely.
Oh.
But the knock and announce means that you have to knock and say, it's us the police, before you enter into them.
And it's more than that. You have to give them at least a reasonable amount of time to comply. So it's not like you can just start banging that door saying, with that Ram saying, police search warrant. No, you're not giving them time to comply.
This is way worse.
So, because, this is a new detail. Every day, just by the way, this case, every day a new detail comes out. I was under the impression that they were only there, and I did hear something about a conversion. I was like, I can't, my brain just can't take anymore. So you're telling me that at first, they had a no-knock, or they applied for a no-knock warrant.
Correct.
That was approved.
Yes.
That was approved.
And then something happens.
Internally, they converted it from a no-knock warrant to a knock and announce.
Because they were like, in order for us to do this no-knock thing, we got to be able to send all these other guys and gals out, and we got to do a whole lot of things, and we can't do that right
So
now.
that's why one of the reforms that we negotiated during the settlement was that if you're going to ask for a no-knock warrant, no-knock warrants are banned in Louisville. So, but when you send in that warrant affidavit, or the warrant affidavit and the SWAT matrix. So that's a SWAT matrix is a form that officers have to fill out when they're going to execute a search warrant. You get a certain score, you have to use SWAT, and a middle score, you have to consult with SWAT to see if SWAT's going to. And then if it's a lower score, you don't have to consult SWAT at all. So that's all the matrix is. Because they changed from a no-knock to a knock and announce, allegedly, after getting the no-knock warrant approved, a lot of people, SWAT was under the impression that there was not going to be a warrant executed at Breonna's house. But what we wanted to do is you can't change, once you apply for it, if you're supposed to have SWAT, and the reason we say SWAT is because they're accustomed to executing these types of warrants. They're typically, they do it in a safer manner than officers not trained under SWAT tactics.
Breonna would be with us if SWAT had executed that.
And so that's why. So now you have to fill out that. You have to get that SWAT matrix approved by a commanding officer before you even go to a judge.
So you can't just go call the judge in the middle of the night, or what? That's how we say it. You call the judge in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, I got a warrant. I'm bringing them by. Can you sign all of these?" Okay, it's very administrative in terms of what we think the process is right now. And we've had judges to say that if you're not careful, you find yourself signing warrants like you're pushing paper
Yeah.
and not really doing the work to understand what I'm signing here and how people's lives could be put into danger, you know, because of it. So now I'm going back because I want to make sure. What we're saying is that once this warrant was converted, so first of all, even if it had just been a no-knock warrant, the premise that they used to apply for it, for the affidavit, application, whatever, was always false because they were using the fact that there were suspicious packages going to Breonna's home, and that made her house the trap house, right? So that was always false because the post office said no, 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 and I thought the post office said no once.
They said no 4 times.
Exactly, they said no 4 times and said it in a way that was the last time, as far as I can see, was like, don't ask us again because we're not getting involved in whatever it is you're trying to do. No suspicious packages, right? So that, even if it was no knock, that was already botched, that
Right.
whole piece. Now we turn around and find out, which I'm learning right here, is that it got converted because at some point internally they were like, no SWAT, no this, no that. Okay, let's just do a knock and announce. So they went there and still 23 people say they heard no announcement, including Kenny, who says I don't hear anything, and he calls the police on the police. Lanita, you and look,
Police on the police.
Sam, 1 second here.
You're good?
You sound like you got the case.
I
I might need to hire as co-counsel.
We
She done
we
broke
grew
this thing
up,
down.
You
and we
don't call
know
the
the hood.
police on the police.
Who calls the police? You ever did that?
I ain't
Call-
never.
So hello, and you don't even say the police are here, Sam. You don't even say the police are here. We don't know why. We hear Kenny. He doesn't say, well, I think there's cops
Right.
outside my door.
These cops
And I
didn't
don't know.
announce, so you
They
can keep
didn't
going, but
announce.
they didn't announce.
Okay, so that's the bottom line. Okay, well, you know, some people you gotta because they get. So now,
Let's talk about the one guy.
yeah, the one guy.
So-
Tell me about the one guy.
So the one guy. So you got Daniel Cameron getting up here saying these cops knocked and announced. We've got this magic witness, you know, who says, you know, he was close proximity, whatever. He lived. These 23 lived just as close. So you get this one guy who doesn't speak very good English, who is called on March 20th, and on this phone call, which is recorded, you know, you got the LMPD, Internal Affairs. I try to use the words that everybody will know.
Right.
You know, we got these fancy terms, like,
Right.
but Internal Affairs calls him, basically says, you know, hey, you know, what was going on? What's your story? First of all, the poor guy's story's all messed up. He says that SWAT's already out there by the time he gets outside. SWAT's not out there till 15, 20 minutes after Brown's killed. But then they ask him point blank, did you hear any announcing? No, there was no announcing. You know, and then they reach out to him again. Hey, did you hear any announcing? No, there was no announcing. And then 3 months later, they reach out to him again, and who knows what happened, and who knows how they, you know, coordinated it. But at that point, he says he heard some announcing. We know from body cameras that afterwards, this guy, you know, he's there because he works late. His 2-year-old daughter is babysat there. He picks her up, puts her in his arms, and leaves. And we hear him on SWAT body camera, you know, basically saying, I want to go home. Can I go home? And we're not even convinced that he went out into the hallway beforehand, because all of his story relates to after SWAT is already on scene. He's saying all the officers had uniforms, and we saw the big SWAT vehicle out there. So this magic witness,
So basically, you're telling me that the magic witness on 2 prior occasions said that he didn't hear any announcement.
didn't hear any announcement.
And then third time, months later, magically, he remembers that he did hear.
Correct.
And this is the witness that they had to corroborate their story that they did knock and announce.
Now, just to throw something in, though, the grand jury did hear from all of the, not all of them, but several other witnesses.
Okay.
They got to hear interviews. All of them told the grand jury through interviews, point blank, nah, there was no announcing. And this grand jury was a great grand jury. There is no way this grand jury was ever going to deduce that these officers were announcing. But the problem is,
They didn't have any charges to connect.
correct, and
to
they
them
weren't
doing
educated on
anything.
self-defense law or the concept of initial aggressor or the
Yeah.
conversion to not, to a knock and announce warrant. So Daniel Cameron's trying to make it sound like this isn't a big deal. This is a very big deal.
Very
So
big.
that-
Yeah, and we know they weren't educated on self-defense law because Daniel Cameron himself doesn't know the self-defense law.
And you
in
know that
Kentucky
because of things he said.
because of things he said,
Mhm.
exactly. So
So we've heard, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
no, you're good.
but we've heard that there were supposedly 2 other jurors. One juror has already got a lawyer that wants to speak up about.
So you
what's
you with
happening.
the phone calls in Kentucky, because I only know about one. So
And then I
don't know
heard,
how-
I just seen on CNN that there's
Oh,
another
CNN,
one
okay.
that wants to
so
come.
I'm talking crap.
Well, I'm just
Be
saying,
quiet.
I'm just doing my research.
He's right.
Excuse me, I'm checked.
You know, I heard that there's another juror that
Yeah,
wants to
another
come
one came
up,
forward.
that came forward. So
So Wednesday, so I guess court hearings are going to decide, hopefully, whether or not these grand jurors are basically given immunity and protection to come out and speak their mind. And frankly, Daniel Cameron opened that door when he tried to put all this on them.
Exactly.
They absolutely 100%, in my opinion, have the right to come out and basically set the record straight.
Yeah.
As soon as that man decided to get up there and basically put it on them, they have the absolute right to say, how dare you? You never gave us the opportunity. It's going to be interesting to see if Daniel Cameron takes back his word from last week, which wouldn't surprise me. Last week he basically said, we're not going to stop these grand jurors if they want to talk. Basically gave them immunity
He did.
himself. But we'll find out by Wednesday if he's going to hold true to his word or if we're going to get some sort of response that says, no, wait a minute, we don't want him
Like
to talk.
he needed more time to get the transcripts ready to put out, which, like you said, I saw on your Facebook post, it was like, we want it done now, but you can understand why the judge would allow him to have additional time. And I think he asked for a week knowing that he would only get a few days, but if he had asked for a day, then, it wouldn't have necessarily worked out as it did. I called him a coward. I'm, just going to put it out there, and I'll tell
Me
you
too.
why.
Wicked, too.
I called him wicked. Well, it was wicked to have Tamika Palmer
It
drive
was.
there for
I
nothing.
call him a coward because he didn't tell her. He didn't have the guts to
He
tell
didn't
her
have the guts
that
to tell her.
the charges were not related to Breonna.
He is a coward because he didn't have the nerve to get up there and tell the country, we cleared these officers
That's
internally,
nothing.
and we didn't give the grand jury an opportunity to actually even deliberate on them because you know what? As prosecutors, we have the discretion to clear officers and, potential defendants internally, and we chose to do that. He tried to put it on the grand jury. That's
And
cowardly.
You know what I
that's
call him?
cowardly. No, we don't want to know.
I
Let's
do.
stick with coward.
Let's stick
Oh,
with
I wanna
coward.
know.
No,
For the,
go ahead,
that,
tell
you
him.
want
tell him
to
off
know.
camera. Tell him
Yeah.
off
This
camera.
is
You like
street
to, you
politicians.
Like,
He
yeah,
said it's
he's
street
like Tamika. He's like Tamika Palmer. You got to call him all the time and say, "Take that down. Take that down." And we're getting a wrap
so
up
I
anyway.
can't get to say it.
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm gonna help you.
But
help
I call
you.
him that.
Uh-huh.
That's what I
So, can we talk about what's next? Because
Yes,
we're
that's what
we're
we
gonna
want.
wrap it up, but people want to know. You said a court hearing.
We want to know there's hope, right?
We want to know there's hope, Sam. We want to know that.
There's some hope. Okay, so we've been scouring through case law and speaking with former attorney generals and all of this, and there's some hope, but we need help. Okay, so in Kentucky, we got a Kentucky Prosecutors Advisory Council. There was a judge who wrote an opinion once who says point blank, an aggrieved victim, like a Tamika Palmer in the situation, if she feels like a prosecutor was unwilling or incapable of presenting charges, that you can actually go to this body and this body can rule on it, and if they agree, they have the discretion to appoint an independent special prosecutor. Sounds like what we need, right?
Yeah.
Daniel Cameron's the head of that Prosecutors Advisory Council. So,
Can I say what I call him?
No.
oh, come on
Go
now.
ahead.
All right. So obviously we need a recusal. We need to really put pressure on these prosecutors to show that the courage to do the right thing definitely takes precedence and is more important than trying to appease the head prosecutor in the state. It's about looking for potential prosecutors across the state that may be willing to actually say, hey, if this is a resource thing, I'd be willing to look into this. I'd be willing to take this on. So it's about identifying some people that maybe have the courage to say, listen, yeah, let me do it. I'll take it on. And it's about putting pressure on Daniel Cameron to say, listen, you don't think I did my job? Fine. I'll appoint a special prosecutor. That's a last resort if you ask me, though, because then he gets to pick who he sends it to, and we've already seen how this political propaganda and system works. Do you really think he's going to send it to, a Democratic prosecutor that really has the courage, or a Republican prosecutor? That wasn't fair for me to say that. a prosecutor that's going to have the courage to really present to a grand jury, because that's all we're asking for, present and actually just give them the opportunity to indict.
And either they do or they don't.
And they do or they don't.
And it would have to be a new grand jury.
Yeah, our grand juries are set each month, so it would definitely be a new one.
A new grand jury.
And we got the federal investigation. Let's not forget about that.
No, I know, but
But we want
I
justice
think people
for this.
also want, and that's a midnight after dark street politicians conversation. They want to know, like, what do we do to make Daniel Cameron pay for what he did in this situation? He didn't do his job. He wasn't professional. You know, you guys have been saying that you feel like he was incompetent in many ways. I say that it was not incompetence to me, because I think there were other people there who knew what to do.
I agree.
And that they made a decision that is just, I mean, he thinks he can talk to us like we're stupid. And that to me makes me feel so disrespected. So I guess elections have consequences.
Yes.
And the conversation that we've got to have as a community to bunker down and say, how do we ensure that if he ever runs for office, not just here, but anywhere that he would like to go, that we put a stop on his tracks or in his tracks immediately, because he does not deserve to have this type of position, to have a position where this is not that he's, you know, not just, I don't want to say just, but he's not the city council member, which is an important position as well. But this is the attorney general.
Head prosecutor.
The
Head
top,
prosecutor.
if you will,
Yep.
in the state. And we have no faith. This community has been broken, and broken by Breonna's murder. But beyond that, broken by an unjust system that continuously perpetuates violence against our communities. And so we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you all are doing. This wasn't enough
Thank
time.
you for everything Until Freedom is
You
doing.
guys-
You all have been
appreciate
such a
you.
blessing.
Thank you, Sam.
We don't want to see you leave.
We gotta go home at some point, but this wasn't enough. We gotta have these conversations, because what we're gonna do is put this out, and we're going to allow people to send us some questions of things
Good.
that they want to know, so we can come back and talk specifically to the audience about things that they're trying to figure out. Hey, you never know, there may be some new prosecutors that are being groomed just because of Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
And we want to highlight, because people don't know what to do. We don't know what the next stage is. So listening to you and you telling us what it is, whatever we can do with our platform to help that process, to educate people, to people in Louisville, and let some of these prosecutors know we want them to step up,
Yeah.
you know, and hold these people accountable. That's what we want to do. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
you.
And everybody in Until Freedom.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Attorney Lonita Baker.
You don't want me to say what I call
and
it?
attorney Sam Aguiar have been with us today talking about Breonna Taylor. This is a series that we are doing on the Breonna Taylor matter. I'm not going to call it the Breonna Taylor case, because she does not have a case, never had a case. The case should have been against 4 officers: Brett Hankinson, John Mattingly, Miles Cosgrove, and Joshua James. Let's make sure we add the person who was responsible for the no-knock warrant application process that did all the lying in the first place. That's the people who should have a case. Breonna Taylor's life, though, matters.
Listen, once again, we might not always be right, and we might not always be wrong, and we definitely don't always agree, but we're going to always be authentic.
Street politicians, peace.
Salute.
That's how we own it.